Well, everyone, my name is Carrie Forbes. I know you know me, but I'm going to introduce myself anyway. I am the interlibrary loan librarian. I'm not the librarian yet. I'm the interlibrary loan supervisor here at LIBS, and I have been doing my internship here with ECU's MLS program. And I've been working heavily with Kathy and Jana and Amanda and many of our librarians here. And primarily, I've been working with Kathy on a project that she wanted to start called the Purple Book. So Kathy and I have been here for quite a few years. We respectively since 2000 and 2005. Kathy serves the Birdie School of Medicine and is the liaison for our medical students. So those are the students that we're kind of working for, and we're going to talk about more about this Purple Book and what it is. Our presentation today is the Purple Book, and we're going to talk about creative marketing in the areas that you specifically cover. And a few of the things that I wanted to share with you today, we're going to call them our Purple Takeaways. We're going to think about brainstorming marketing ideas. In doing this, you can think about each of your individual departments, each of Carrie, your researchers. They're all going to have things in common. They're all going to have certain similarities, certain differences. And just taking the time, maybe once a year, to sit aside and brainstorm different ways that you can reach out to them. So my goal for this really is, as Kathy brought this up, made me think about one of the things we can be better at as librarians is marketing. And how do we do this? How do we figure out creative ways to do this and not just the same boring things every year, just the regular library orientation? I think there are different ways that we can think about doing this and that we can share with our specific schools. So with Kathy, we wanted to first think about our audience. So the first thing I'm going to do here is we're going to do a little split screen here, if I can. Okay, so this here is Birdie School of Medicine's entering class of 2018. They'll be graduating in 2022. They actually do this nicely for us, and we can automatically get a nice little picture of who our students are. I'm sure, I don't know how available this is for other departments, but it might be nice to ask. One thing we know they have in common is 86 out of 86 are North Carolina residents. So we know they've got North Carolina in common. Something interesting to know is that 45% are male, 55% are female. The average age is 25, but the range is 21 to 44. So you can think about different ways different people like to communicate. Those older students might prefer a print material. The younger students might only want something electronic that they can view on their phone. Other important information I think from this is that it's telling you they all have undergrad degrees and 18 have done additional graduate study. And with each of these, their average GPA for undergraduate was 3.6, while they're 3.9 for graduate. So what does that basically tell you about these students? They're really smart. These are some really smart students. This MCAT, the new format, they're averaging around 507. The top they can get is 514. These are some just exceptionally smart students. So we want to think about the information that they're going to need, how we can present that information to them, and hopefully get it to them in a way that they'll be willing to accept it and hear it. So we want you to think about ways, like I said before, to reach out to your students beyond just the basic library orientation. We're also going to talk about best practices when we're using LibGuides. And at the very end, I'm just going to talk briefly about some new technologies you can use when you're creating presentations or sharing information with your students. Go back over here. So, why a purple book? What is this little book in front of you? Kathy, do you want to give, do you want to explain what the purple book is?
Sure. A while back, Coronado and I were over at Medical Education Day sitting at a table for LIBS Library, and that's where medical students do research and present it in poster form. And the medical students, I believe they were year 2 or year 3, I cannot remember, that were next to us had created this little bitty pocket guide for their colleagues, for the other students, that answered a lot of questions that they needed right on the spot, from their clinicals, when they would go on their clinicals, to where to get the best coffee. And it was a neat little book that fit in their pocket. So Coronado and I got to talking. We thought, well, let's create something, a little book like that, with the most common asked questions from these med students, and see how it turns out for us. And we were going to distribute them in the library. So we gathered information from all the med students and what they would like to see, and then Coronado left. So, and thank goodness Carrie stepped in, because we all know that I'm not savvy in the technology part at all. So this is how it all came about. And not only is it for med students, it can be for everybody as well. Okay?
Yeah. Thank you, Kathy. So, as Kathy told me about this, I felt like, well, this is a perfect tool for marketing your services, not only just for the library, but for your specific department. If you wanted to, you know, get even more specific in what you were sharing, but it was a great general guide that you could sort of take anywhere. You could, you know, you could just go sit at a table in the student center and have a short poster up and sit there with these books, and should anyone come up, hand them a book, and it's something they can slip in their pocket. But that was really important to us about the medical students, was that this was something small, something flippable, something they could also add notes in if they wanted, if they were actually attending the orientation, or if they were doing rounds and they needed to jot down quick notes. We wanted it to sort of be multi-purpose as well. But primarily, we wanted it to have quick information about LIBS. So why do we want a print resource? Why is that important? Because I really had to think about this, because I'm like, well, most of these students are going to want something online. However, I think there is still a lot of valid information showing that having something they can carry with them, something that'll fit into a lab coat, they're not able to have a lot of things when they go on these rounds, when they're doing their work. So something that they could just quickly slip in their pocket, and they literally have the library information at their fingertips. So how did we create this? This was a really fun process to me, because while I have published books in the past, I've never actually done the actual printing and binding and figuring out all the dynamics of how the layout works for these books. So this was actually an interesting process for me. So we started with, as you can see here, Kathy's initial notes written down with Kathy and Coronado, and they had laid out all of the pages listed that they wanted, and the different information that they wanted on each page. Now, in the printing world, this is called copy. So we had our copy, and we had a basic idea of where we wanted to go, but I'm a very visual person. So this didn't help me a whole lot in trying to figure out what this thing was going to look like, because we didn't have anything to go by. So I found this flippable sticky note on my desk. We ripped off about 15 of them and stapled them together and said, okay, here's our mock book. And that kind of worked. That seemed like the right size. It gave us a good idea of how to lay the pages out. We realized we wanted it to flip with either a coil. I wanted it on the top, but Staples screwed up and did it on the side. So we got them for free, which is fine. So we realized that was a really good way to lay out the basics of our book. So once we had the ideas, I started playing with Microsoft Publisher. And how many of you have used Publisher in here before? Jana, Nate? I didn't know anything about Publisher at all, so I was really kind of in the dark. So the best thing for me to do for Publisher was first to just use some YouTube tutorials. I watched about 5 YouTube tutorials on how to create this document in Publisher. So the first thing I realized was that the nice thing about it is, you can choose your size. So we chose our size. We thought about the color scheme we wanted. Of course, it was going to be purple. And then we added on with Publisher, and I think this happens with PowerPoint as well, is everything is sort of in a layer. You put a text box, so you've got that layer. You put a picture up, you've got that layer. And I don't know if this happens in PowerPoint as much, I can't remember. But I know what I ran into with this book is when you go back to edit, if your layer is covering what you're editing, you have to end up moving it back out of the way, editing, moving it back. So that's definitely one kind of problematic thing about Publisher. But a couple of things that we learned about writing for doing this is we learned there were differences in writing for print versus writing for the web. So one thing we thought about was, for instance, hyperlinks. When you're on the web, usually they're highlighted. If they're on print, you might want to highlight them underneath the box so they know that you're trying to get them to a link. We thought about adding QR codes, but then the sizing just didn't really work for QR codes. So one of the things we did was use bit.ly links, if you're familiar with that. It's a shortened form of a web link. It's a free tool that you can use, so we used a lot of those. And when you're also writing copy for print, you have to think about how much space do you want to use? How can you grab someone's attention? The type of wording that you want to use, is it going to be different than what you're using online? The nice thing about Publisher, as far as creating the text boxes, is it works just like a Word document once you have it open. So that was a nice feature. And the text boxes, the picture boxes, when you add pictures, it will automatically size the picture to your box. So that was a nice feature of using Publisher. So once we put it in Publisher, we realized that you have to edit and edit and edit and edit some more. Then someone will look at it and you thought you were great, and then you're going to have to edit it and edit it and edit it again. Our final hope is that when Kathy has it just to where we want it, and there's still a few things that we look at now and we know we want to go back and change, once we have it the way that Kathy wants it, we'll send a final printing to be done in Joiner's Teaching Resource Center so that they can send us back, say, 30 copies for the first year, and we'll just see how that goes. Any questions about using Publisher or about how we did it? All right, so the online edition. This is what I really wanted. I really wanted an online component for students. And eventually I want to be able to put the link of this on the book as well, so that if they don't need the book anymore or don't want to use it, they can always use the online edition. So this is our basic layout for the online edition. And this was my third time trying to create a LibGuide. And while I was doing that, I wanted to learn better how to use LibGuides and how to create them in a way that they would actually be used and read. So in doing that, I watched a couple more webinars about LibGuide design. And the thing that stood out most to me was to always design thoughtfully. and to keep your students and your focus group in mind when you are creating. So this is our finalized online book, and as you can see, we named it the Purple Book Online. It's very easy to search. It's very easy to find if you're searching the guides. So you want a really easy name when you're naming it. A few things we learned that I realized while viewing the webinars was that you want to keep that copy short and sweet. You don't want to have any unnecessary clicks or text there that just isn't necessary. When you're naming, I keep wanting to call them tabs, but Springer Share calls them pages. So when you're making your pages, if you can use a verb, if you can keep it really short and sweet, and you want to be keep that going throughout your design. You want to be consistent. So reserve a room, printing, poster printing, you want to keep it short and sweet, and we tried to match it to the book text as much as we could. Now, as far as keeping style, one thing I realized, or I learned when watching the webinars, was that some universities actually have style guides for their staff. And I don't know if this is something that LIBS or Joiners Together would ever want to do. I know that kind of cuts back on creativity a little bit, but I thought this was a really useful and well-written guide. This is from Boston College Libraries, just some basics on how to write for your guide, how to reach out to your students. Are you using it as a guide? Are you using it as a web page? What is your tone in writing? There was just some really useful information here, and I thought, you know, maybe one day we could do this. We could try to create some sort of guide for our librarians to help them have more cohesive and consistent LibGuides. So that's something we could think about. When you're designing your LibGuide, of course you want to have similarities in your text. And one thing to remember is that the text that's used already when you're writing this is already ADA compliant. So you really want to stick with that text unless there's a big reason that you don't need to. Another thing is that when you're adding pictures, you generally want to have very similar sized pictures so that it's not jolting when you go from one page to the next. And you also, when you're adding these pictures, you have an option, and it'll say something about alternate text. And you want to make sure to title this so that if you have a blind reader, they don't just see picture. They see a duck walking in front of LIBS Library, and then it will read them the rest of the text. So to keep this ADA compliant, you definitely want to add that alt text to your pictures. Another thing to keep it consistent was that we tried to make sure all of our headers were the same size and all of our sub information was the same size. And with websites, you always want to make sure these students know and understand what a website is. They know where to click. So we don't need to write click here. We don't need to write visit here, which is something I really like to do. And I've already seen other places that I need to go back and fix this where I wrote that. But these students are mostly digital natives and they know this stuff. So anything unnecessary that you can get out of that text, take it out. Another thing is when you're doing tables, see right there, there's a click here. I need to get rid of that. When you're doing tables, you only want to do tables for separating information. You don't want them for design. And what I mean by that is if you look at this practice, this is a sample LibGuide here. Here's a really bad table design. It's very 90s. They just wanted to throw in a picture in one side and put information in the other, and then they've got that click here. And this is really what you don't want to do with tables. You really just want to save your tables for information that needs to be boxed in that way, like options for contacting us. Another good important option about creating these guides, if I can do this correctly, is it's better to go with 2 columns if you can as opposed to 3, just because it gets really jumbled once you move that text in a mobile device. It's just not going to respond quite as well if you have more than 2 columns. Okay. Also, when you're creating it, the first thing that pops up is a home page. You don't need one. Unless you have like 20 pages here that you need to kind of give some description for, like a table of contents, you really don't need a home page on your LibGuides. Just jump in. They're really just going to scan this text and see what they need. Like we had talked about before, you want to try to chunk your text or use bullets, pictures, small ways to separate the information. Anything to kind of make the text just very scannable and easy to read. And finally, you definitely don't want to underline on your actual web, on the LibGuide itself, because then it's going to look like a hyperlink, and we don't want that. And lastly, you just want to use as much natural language as you can. You want to be, while these are very smart students, we're just talking to them. We just want them to know the basic information about the library itself. We're not getting into super detailed teaching here. So does anyone have any questions about how we created the LibGuide, or questions on what I feel are some good tips on using them? No? Okay, so I also wanted to share, when you've got this LibGuide the way you want it, and you've made this easy to find, let's go back to the main one. You've got your easy to use website, the Purple Book Online after the LibGuides. Use that on your email address, use it on your cards, use it when you're, if you're communicating with someone, I don't know, through our Facebook page, pop in that address so that they can see it. There are a lot of ways you can use these LibGuides other than just sharing them at your library orientation. So find different ways to use these and market these, because we can use them in a lot more ways than we are now. You guys are so quiet today. I know it's 3 o'clock. I should have brought chocolate. All right. It's just like a real library class, let me tell you. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to show you was just some technology. I love PowerPoint, and I know it's really important, and it has its place, especially when you're doing really in-depth information and teaching sessions. But start thinking about other options you can use when you're presenting. What we've used today is called Microsoft Sway. This is a free, well, it's free to us. It's a free resource in our 365 suite online. You don't have to bring your zip drive. You don't have to, be on your account. You can open this anywhere with your ECU username and password. So this would be really great for if you were traveling, going to conferences, a really great way to share your information. It's not quite as adaptable as PowerPoint. You can't change the size of the pictures and things like that. And you can do it beforehand and then put it in smaller or bigger how you want, but once you have it in here, you can't change it. So it does have some limitations, but I think it's a fun, different way to look at information. Use your LibGuides. One thing that I really enjoyed was when Amanda came and did her presentation for us as a librarian. She created a LibGuide looking website and taught directly from it. So think about doing that as well. You can create a whole LibGuide just for a conference presentation, just for a class. One thing I meant to mention in the section about LibGuides was that from a few studies that were done, it was shown that LibGuides that were created specifically for courses as opposed to subjects got much higher use and feedback than just subject guides. So if you were creating LibGuides and can work with the professor to really embed yourself and create a LibGuide that works specifically for those class assignments, has a much better chance of being used. Another fun site that I really like and use a lot is Canva. Let's see if I can log in. So Canva is a way to sort of create your own, I can't remember here. Oh, wrong one. So Canva is a really fun way to create, like, it's great for blogs, it's great for Facebook, but you can also create little posters for your email. You can create posters to add into a presentation, to add into a Word document, into PowerPoint. It really is fun, and it has a lot of unique designs that are free and that are easy to use. So say we wanted to create this, you would just go in here, find a design you liked. Let's make this bigger. Then all you do is just change the text. Well, you can change the colors, you can change basically anything here. Purple and gold. There we go. I mean, really pretty, yeah. But you can change anything, and then once you've set it the way you want it, you can go in, grab your snipping tool, create your picture, and then you can always come back and change it. It'll save your original. This is what I use to create all of the Anchazzle announcements that you've seen recently. It's really easy to use, even for someone like me who has no background in art or design whatsoever. This is not showing that at all. So that's a really fun website to use, and it's free. As we talked about before, Bitly or Google are great. Goo.gl, Google, are great shortening sites for links. So if you open this up, you don't even have to be a member here or log in or anything. You can just copy in your copy in your website. It shortens it immediately, and you can paste it into your document. Now, if you do sign up for it, and it's free, it will track the usage of your site. The usage of your link, and little analytics like that are really nice for reporting. Let's see. And lastly, there is one called Zoho Show. And what this is basically like, kind of like PowerPoint. It's kind of like an online version of PowerPoint, and you can collaborate with other people and create really unique PowerPoint-looking designs that have a lot more flexibility in the designs, in how you want to present them. So they just have a lot more interesting types of design, a lot more interesting ways to transfer, to move from slide to slide. Things like that are really interesting. You can create tables, you can create charts, you can add media text just like you can in PowerPoint, and you can work with other collaborators. So this is another neat feature, and again, you could just go to wherever you were at, go right on to Zoho Show, and start from there, so you didn't have to carry it with you. Okay. So let's just get back to the purple book. Let it readjust here. Okay, so I do have a list of resources if anyone wants to look at them or use them. And what questions do you guys have? No questions at all? Did you?
I love how you did the LibGuide for that, because when I saw this, that was my first thought was, this is great to carry around. I didn't even have it in mind, med folks carrying it in their coat pockets.
Yeah.
That's perfect to be able to just flip to, on the fly when you're on the go, and you don't want to necessarily take the time to
Right.
research and look up what you need, but the way you laid it all out in LibGuide was pretty sweet.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I printed them out here. At Staples, they're expensive. It would have been $26 had they actually charged us. So, but they printed it wrong, so we got them for free. However, I think we could get it pretty cheaply done at Joiner's printing center that they have there, the Teaching Resources Center. Since, like, the way we do with posters is enormously cheaper than going to Staples or something, I think they kind of offer the same type of discount if we do it through there.
I'm just curious because I think clinical students would really appreciate this. They're not allowed to have mobile devices in some of their sites. It depends on their instructor.
Right.
So some of them aren't able to just get online right there, while they're in clinicals. But maybe if they had some kind of a resource.
Just to remind them that you're there, that they always have you to go to. Yeah. Does anyone have questions about Sway or how to use it?
Might have to get a demo from you.
I sure can, yes. And what this does is it basically just sends you that link. So, yeah. Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we had planned on doing that. This is just, we've got a few changes we have to do. Sorry, Carrie.
Oh, no, please. Yeah. Do you guys like the idea of the books? Okay. I wasn't quite sure how people would feel about it being a print resource and if that would be as useful as the online. But I think that's still a way to reach out to people, and I think they still use them if they have them.
A lot of students, even the younger ones, are saying, I just like a book. I like things printed. I like to feel it. So
Right.
they do still value, and I like that you have note sections on the back.
Yeah.
Because I think that they do value being able to just very quickly jot something down, or to be able to just flip to it. And
Right. I mean, ideally, I'd like it on like cardstock or something, so it was a little bit more durable. Yeah.
that way they're not having to try to remember where do I click.
Right.
If they're already struggling to find the resource and navigate, then to be faced with having to click on the website, I think is
Right.
difficult. So this is really great. They can just flip to whatever they need.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's really cool.
Well, thank you guys. Well, I really appreciate you spending about 45 minutes. I know our days are really, really busy, so I really appreciate you guys being here and coming and listening. Thank you very much.
Good job, Carrie.